Curious, are the most of you here involved in education? Is everybody involved in education pretty much? Okay. All right, because this is a very targeted kind of topic, so I was just curious about that. We named it Grow Your Own Cyber Internship to try to make it kind of interesting, but it really is creating a cyber internship program within an academic environment. So in this case, not involving an outside business. And I would like to say that this is in addition to other internships that we do offer at Anne Arundel within, say, our IT department or that kind of thing. This is a little different from that. So the background on this. Like you, we are always striving to try to meet the exploding demand for cybersecurity professionals. And we are also always trying to innovate in the way we teach and engage our students. We know that cybersecurity professionals need a solid technical foundation, and that's what we do in the classroom. But students need more than that, and we're looking for ways to extend not only the tool set that they come away with, but their exposure and workplace experience. And one of those ways is with internships. Our advisory groups are always telling us more internships, and we love internships, but if you've ever tried to create one, you know it can be a struggle, not only to get it in the first place, but to also maintain it. Not only does the internship take productive time away from employees and companies that should be making money for the employee, it also can be a cost to the cyber student. Internships are often unpaid, and if they're getting college credit, they've also had to pay us for the internship. So we're keeping all of those things in mind. And we've also found that often for an internship to work, it really needs a dedicated person within that business who is the champion for it. And then if that person gets redirected, we no longer have that person to lead it, and we can't sustain it. So faced with the dilemma of the need for cyber internship programs and their limited supply, our department, which is the Cybersecurity, Networking, and Digital Forensics Department at Anne Arundel, we came up with a plan for a paid internship program that we could sustain within our department itself. The focus is for the intern to investigate a cybersecurity tool, develop a hands-on scenario or lab for that tool. Interns are paired with a cybersecurity faculty who guides them through the investigation of the tool, the development and delivery of the scenario lab, documentation of it, and then they deliver it within the classroom, and it can be available to other sections of that same class. So our hope is that the interns not only learn something in it, but it also helps them build their self-guided, their need to self-guide themselves through their career as always having to build their skill set. So a lot of the internship, they determined their process, and they're going to have to do that when they're professionals as well. So in this presentation, you're going to learn how to structure and run a successful cyber intern program, and also want to point out that this was funded by an NSA grant, the Cybersecurity Education Workforce Grant. We got a one-year grant to do this. Okay, so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to give some background and implementation. I'm faculty, but I'm also the lead on this. We've got a mentor, and we've got a mentee. And please don't feel like you have to wait till the end for questions. This is an informal presentation. If we say something that sparks your interest, please raise your hand, and we'll go to it right then. Okay. So, background. We know through research that internships are a way to build experiential learning. And we wanted to provide a way to do that in a one-on-one environment so that while we didn't have an employer, we had a faculty member mentoring each of the students. And then they developed this deliverable that not only they give to students, it's also a physical thing that they have in a binder that when they go to a interview, they can actually bring with them and say, you know, I developed this, I taught it, as a kind of a broader skill set. So the structure of it, just to highlight a few of that, we have the mentor-mentee structure. Each cyber intern's paired with a professor, in this case for a class in which they were taking, so they were registered for that class. That also then gave them the place where they could deliver it. So this was our upper level classes, which is kind of tight in a 2-year program. In a 4-year, you could really get up there into that 4th year. It would be have even more impact. But we made it happen. This gave them an environment for delivering their project and also benefit other students in the class. We made it a paid internship, and this was very specific because we learned through research that data has shown that first-generation, minority, and older students participate in internships less than their peers, and they do this because of the cost to them of an unpaid internship. Cyber interns, as I mentioned, come out with a tangible document that not only shows an employer their ability to create a training document, but also what that technical skill is that they worked on. And then there's the oral skill that they got by actually having to lead the presentation of it. So we're also working on communication and project management skills. So in the nitty-gritty of it, we came up with a timeline. We found that about 2/3 into the prior semester, we needed to start recruiting. We were supposed to be able to deliver 2 cohorts, one in the fall, 6 students, one in the spring, 4 students. Unfortunately, the NSA process of getting everyone selected for this grant didn't happen exactly as they thought, so we couldn't do it in the fall. No problem. We shifted it to the spring. We had 6 interns with 4 mentors. 2 of the mentors had 2 students. And then just to give you an idea of how things work. And the smoothness of this really mattered that we had time to put together these processes so that when the semester began, which was the day their paid intern began, we had a kickoff meeting set up. They had already met with their mentors, so they knew how often they were going to be meeting. They knew what to expect throughout the semester, like you would if you were going to a job. Yes? Totally from the grant, that's right. So the grant paid for, we also had a stipend for faculty. Then the students got paid. We also put in a wish list of a whole bunch of equipment and software we wanted. We asked for everything we could possibly think of, and we got it. So yeah, all those pieces came. So here, I'm just going to show you just a few of the things that helped us in the structure of it. We really wanted students to be very clear on what they were going to be committing to since they were being paid for this. So they learned about the program through an information sheet that was distributed in the classes that were a prerequisite for the class they could be the intern in. Interested students completed the application that were then reviewed by the mentors. And then we contacted the students and had a contract written for that for them. So this is just a little quick showing of the information sheet. And I point this out because those 1 through 6 really gave the steps that they were going to be responsible for. They had to select and research a tool, develop the hands-on scenario for the tool, document it as a lesson plan of which we gave them templates, present the lab, then refine it based on feedback, and then complete a comprehensive teacher toolkit for that. And then you can see we gave them eligibility for what courses they could do it in. And we kind of had 3 groups. We have 3 topic areas. Networking was one, digital forensics was another, and security was another. That also parallels the way we give out our degrees. We have 3 degrees in information assurance and cybersecurity, and then each of those is a specialty in one of the areas I just mentioned. So then we asked for their application, again, as a part of a commitment to them, and this also reminded them what they were going to be doing. And in the application, they were to talk about what they wanted to do with their particular topic. We gave them a bunch of suggestions, and then they could come up with their own. For example, one of the students wanted to look into how difficult it is to hack a remote access control for a home entry system. Very specific, but that had sparked that person's interest, And that's not something we would normally get into to actually execute in a regular class, a standard class. So just an example of how they were extending what they were going to be studying that semester. And then we gave them an agreement form where they had to commit to all the things that they were going to do, and this is where we told them how much we were going to pay them. We paid them $15 an hour for 45 hours because that's a typical hours for a 3-credit course, so we thought that that would be a reasonable amount of time. And just the last thing I'm going to show you is this is the exit interview. So in addition to the documents that they came up with in their binder, we also had them do an exit interview so we could learn from what they had learned. They had other templates. They had to do a presentation of their topic to the other mentors, again, trying to work on that teamwork aspect of the work environment. And at the end, our last wrap-up meeting, again, they each spoke about what they had accomplished. So just to summarize then, administration, so the expenses that we had were the stipends for the mentors and the mentees, project equipment. So we did things like one of the topics was we are a Cisco home house pretty much. So we wanted to, one of the interns wanted to look at other kinds of routers. So we needed to buy a Juniper and a bunch of different routers, and that cost money. So that was built into our costs. And then we got a really great laptop for each of the students. We figured we would never have more than 6 interns, so we got 6, and that limits how many we can have in a term. And we set up a dedicated room. We wanted them to have a place they could go to where we could put the books that they were using as reference material, where they could store their own things and meet with each other, again, trying to simulate that work environment a bit, that team environment. And the last thing for me then is sustainability. So we would like to continue this. We are so excited. So our next cohort will be in the fall, which should have been 4 because we had budgeted to have 10 interns. But we had great applications for the fall cohort. We really want to do 6. So we've made some decisions about how we're spending some of the money within the grant. We've asked permission to be able to move things between buckets. Our faculty are being generous with their time. Willing to spread their time out a little bit, so now we're going to be able to have 6. And that to me speaks probably the loudest for the success of this program, that the students feel like it's something that they're hearing from others it's worth doing, and that we're going to be able to replicate that, being able to pay them. And I'm going to go to our foundation, and I'm hoping, because people in foundation, they love to have their name on something, so this could be, the Smith Cyber Intern program, and work out the costs of that so that we can continue to fund it that way. And we're going to need to have the commitment of administration, which so far we seem to have, and to drive us through that too. So that's my administrative spiel. Yes?
Yeah, if you're going to continue it, how much?
Well, that's a good question. So the intern gets paid about $675, right? So, and the way we paid faculty was based on faculty load hours. We were very generous, and we wanted faculty to want to do it, wanted to feel good about that. And I was doing administration for it, so it won't be that expensive. We've already talked to the faculty, have come up with what they really think is a reasonable stipend from an ongoing perspective, which will probably be about half of what we had gotten through the grant. We're probably not going to buy as much equipment, so it's not going to cost as much as it did. The grant was $122,000. We asked for everything, that equipment, and that equipment is going to be able to carry us through. So we'll be able to budget it out much, much better. Yeah. Sure. The mentor.
Okay. I would say that I have the smallest role of the 3 because I was really just there in a support capacity. So I've just sort of divvied mine up into 3 categories. Grant administration, really the majority of it was done by Kasia, and Dawn was the other administrator. But there were some things we had to do as faculty on the front end, like providing ideas for sample projects. So we had to kind of envision, gosh, really, if I had the time in the classroom to do extra stuff, what would I want to do? And so that took some time in planning and preparing for. And based on those ideas, I had to determine hardware, which I had no idea what these students were going to want to choose to do. So that was maybe one of the harder aspects, is knowing what hardware to purchase. So I did sort of ask for the moon there, which is great, because whatever wasn't accomplished, I now feel like other students can then continue on and maybe pick up where Jason left off. And then we had some initial grant meetings that we had to participate in. So those were sort of the administrative roles, I would say. Some of our meetings, one of the things that we weren't sure about, the logistics of it, because these are full-time students. We are full-time faculty, and we weren't really sure how we would be able to meet on a regular basis. So we also opted for using like Zoom in and being able to connect remotely, virtually, so that we could, address whatever issues. And we did have one scenario where we couldn't meet, I couldn't meet, and so I had to dial in from home, and it worked out great. So during the project, once Jason and I met up, we together determined what the initial goals for the project would be. It was really up to the student, because I'm just there in a support capacity again. So, but together we kind of talked about what certain ideas were, and so we had big ideas in the beginning, which was great. I also assisted in getting hardware in and getting it set up, getting it ordered, getting it set up. We had some sort of technical, connectivity issues that we had to work out together, operation of the equipment. I was, just there. Again, Jason did the bulk of the work, but there were some, sticking points that I was able to help with. The other thing was sort of knowing what the finished or final product would look like. Jason wanted some ideas. So I came up with some labs that we actually use in the classroom, and said, these are the topics that you're addressing in the classroom. Can you replicate this with different equipment? So it just meant taking out what the step-by-step instructions were for that lab, and he had to figure out what those specific steps were. So I provided the labs so he could mirror the project on other equipment and get that hands-on experience with other vendors. There was also some, not everything was a one-to-one mapping with the technology. So it was actually a learning process for both of us, because I have very specific, hardware experience, as does Jason, and so together we were able to figure most of it out, which is exactly what it is in the real world, honestly. You get thrown into any IT environment, you're not going to come in knowing everything there is to know about that environment. You're going to have to pick it up and learn it as you go, and that's exactly what I think we replicated here. Excuse me, the completion of the project was just helping to prepare that final project. Jason had a great idea to take the labs that go with the equipment and laminate them so that wherever the equipment goes, so does the lab. Because we have a total of 5 Cisco labs, and so if this equipment happens to travel somewhere to one of the other labs, the instructions can go with it. And then he had a binder to complete, so I helped with the final deliverable and the documentation. I also had to provide feedback and write a letter, which Jason hasn't seen yet, but we'll get to see hopefully when we get back. Overall, it was a great experience for me because Jason and I had wonderful discussions throughout the semester, both from a school academic perspective, but also just personal stuff going on. Jason had a full plate, and I think it kind of helped to have that sounding board and have somebody there to help, solve some of the problems, whether it be actual logistical or technical problems, or even just, how am I going to get all this done within the time constraint. So I think it was great from that project planning standpoint and time management, being able to support him in that way. I really enjoyed working with him, and I'm anxious to see, and I know he'll do great in the future, so hopefully he'll keep in touch and come back and see us. So,
thank you. Okay. Fantastic. So they really did a lot of the legwork up front, as I've already said, in preparing the students and setting them up to succeed extremely well. I cannot emphasize that enough. Just in anything you undertake, the more preparation you can do up front, it saves you twice or 3 times as much on the back end. So this really is a great representation of just that preparedness. When I entered into this, we had discussed several project ideas before any of them were selected. And then once we did finally select a project to work on, we determined what that scope would be. That scope being the deliverables for the end of the semester. And that was the beginning of this project management scenario that they've been discussing and really what has driven the entire project thereafter. The weekly meetings that they've discussed were more on the mentee and mentor side, but we did have 2 to 3 meetings where the entire cohort, if you want to call it that, got together and discussed the projects, not just one-to-one, but it was a great forum for open discussion on any project that a student was working on, and it opened up the troubleshooting and problem-solving capabilities of the entire table. My methodology is different than Mary's, which is different than another professor's or another student's, so that was important to really emphasize and to showcase the different way of lateral thinking and problem-solving. They've discussed a lot of the project materials that were handed down in the form of labs and paperwork and organizing our thoughts to deliver to the students thereafter. That was so important in setting us up, again, on a track to succeed within these deliverables on a timely manner. The class presentation that we had, again, I thought was a great way to present information that we had been learning by ourselves, researching by ourselves, and then disseminating to fellow students. This class presentation also set us up well for our final reflections. So I was able to go back, look at all of the research I had done, all of the work I had done, and then put together a message for the students that I talked to. That message being that the foundational knowledge that we've actually been learning and practicing in classroom, doing labs, doing homework, is more important than any manufacturer-specific equipment that you're working on. Several other people here have talked about defense in depth being something that you shouldn't rely on one manufacturer, because if you have everything in the same line, that's the same equipment, that's not going to lend you well to defending yourself, because if they know that flaw, they know the flaw for your entire system. Mary mentioned our working relationship, and it really was a pleasant experience. It wasn't only just enjoyable, but I had a lot of fun talking to her. My schedule, probably more so than anybody else's, was a bit difficult. I was taking 21 credits, I was doing the internship and planning a wedding at the same time. So I don't recommend anybody doing that, so it was an interesting ride. Oh, there we go. So within that, my message to anybody that wants to do something like this is be cognizant of your time. You know, talk to your students, ask them what they want to do, ask them what their workload is going to be, and really determine if they are going to be able to put into it the hours necessary to deliver a final project and a product that is going to sustain itself and last. The confidence that this internship provided, again, really builds from that foundational knowledge of our early classes. It has set me up to research better, to understand that when I walk into any situation, I might not know this specific command to execute on this equipment, but I know a starting place to look when I'm researching that answer. And that, more than anything, I think is invaluable in terms of setting me up to succeed in the future, no matter where I go. And then lastly, I'd say the applicants that they were targeting, while upperclassmen, I was a unique situation. I didn't have the 3 or 4 level networking equipment or experience in terms of classwork, but I was able to come in and succeed because of my determination, knowing that this is something that I want to do, this is something that is very important to me, and this is something that I think anybody can do if they're willing to put in the time and energy to learn that material. So with that, I'll hand it back over.
Okay, so that's all of our formal stuff.